My guest today is filmmaker Meredith Yinger, along with her new documentary film, Scars Unseen. Now, this film is a collaborative effort co-created and co-executive produced by Meredith, along with cinematographer Natalie Perez. Now, Scars Unseen is a triumph of the human spirit documentary following three women who have overcome domestic violence and are paying it forward. Now, this inspiring documentary highlights each individual's experience involving domestic violence, focusing not on the grim details of their trauma, but rather on the tools and techniques that help them to persevere on their healing journey. Now, Scars Unseen aims to shine a light on the power of healing, de-stigmatize victimhood, and encourage open communication about the causes, treatment, and prevention of abuse. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome documentary filmmaker Meredith Yinger and her very powerful film, Scars Unseen, to the show. Welcome, Meredith.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Oh, first of all, I loved your film. Boy, does it hit so many very, very important points. But I've got to start off with your filmmaking career because I read where you got tired of the negative news stories that you were covering at a local news station, which I personally find local news lacking real journalism, especially today. Was it the
Mm.
negativity of the job that led you to find more positive stories with the art of filmmaking?
Yes, that's a great question. I really did feel that the news was kind of in the same loop cycle. It was stuck in covering the same stories, the same, break-ins, and it kind of seemed all doom and gloom. And um, I was really fortunate when I was at LMU to discover documentary filmmaking, which kind of took my investigative journalist approach and love of asking questions and merged it with my love of filmmaking. And so I'm grateful to that experience because it led me to where I am today, and I couldn't have done it without that.
Well, I'm very happy with the fact that you are actually using your journalistic skills, which I think are passing away by the day or the hour when it comes to local news, national news. So it's just coming to be, I don't know, creative narratives and clickbait in my book. But I want to talk about this very powerful documentary that you did, Scars Unseen. Why
Mhm.
did you want to tackle the subject of domestic violence and abuse?
So domestic violence has kind of been an undercurrent in some of, my experiences with either family or friends, and it was kind of lingering, in the background as to like, oh, it's there, we don't really talk about it. But it wasn't really until meeting Trish Steele that it kind of blew, my mind, our minds wide open into how this isn't a one size fits all issue. And initially we were just going to focus on Trish story and her work in her nonprofit, and she's been doing this amazing work for decades. And her story, as you know, is incredible. Like the things that she went through at all different levels of her life, it is really inspiring. And um, meeting Trish, that's how we also met Maha, because we were filming at one of the nonprofit events, and Maha was speaking alongside Trish, and they were on a panel together. And so that was kind of the first or second story that kind of started coming together, and really showcased that there is such a breadth and depth, and that this issue does not discriminate. It affects people of all socioeconomic statuses, race, gender. It really is an all encompassing issue. And I felt it was really important to showcase that and to kind of shy away from the narrative that we see or the stereotypes of the only one instance of domestic violence that is ever really covered.
You know, with Maha and Trish, they both had that. There was actually an underlying strength in the very beginning. They knew what was wrong, that men
Mhm,
don't treat women like that.
mhm,
And so there was always this underlying fighting spirit in both of them, and which I'm so glad that you showcased because I loved Trish. I mean, That woman put ups with nothing. And a lot of women are going to be encouraged by watching Trish's segment in this film. But it was Adrienne that showed me that is most likely what millions of women are going through. I mean,
Mm,
that's the one where you're being pushed down, you're being treated worse than a second or third class citizen in a marriage or a relationship, and stuck in a cycle of how do I get out? Can I get out? And
mhm.
so you showcased these three women just in this, I'll just call it a perfect light, because meaning that you brought forth their stories with such clarity that any woman that watches this documentary, and maybe they are in a domestic violent or abuse type relationship or situation, you're showing them that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the takeaway that I want people, watching these stories to have is that you can change your narrative and that there are resources and that there is help out there. And like you said, I just want to touch on Adrian's story for a moment because I think it's really, really pivotal what she says about, explaining that, it's not a one off, it's a process of leaving, right? It's not an event, it's a process. And I think if we, as friends, family members, even society, can understand and wrap our brains around that concept, then we can get involved along the process, right? Or in the process and sort of guide each other through instead of looking at it as a one and done situation.
Yeah, and with Adrian, you're right. It's a process, not an event. She had to, of course, if I remember correctly, she left, was it twice or was it three times? But the last time she methodically planned out, because
Hmm.
technically the second time she left, she had it made
Right.
and then fell for that, oh, I'm so sorry speech. It's the same speech that probably every man has ever given in this type of situation. And then end up going to therapy, but not really sticking to it, because some people can go to therapy, but they're not there to change. They're there to prove to everybody else that they're going and think that's enough.
Right. Right.
But you're right, it's a process. She planned her way out. And for a lot of women, again, it's this documentary that there Meredith, you're giving millions of women these little pieces of incredible encouraging advice and insights that are going to free them.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really do want this project to not only resonate but also to empower people, right? Like I wanted to portray this subject giving all of these ladies stories, time to express what happened and not completely negate, the abuse and the trauma that they went through, but do it in a way that it wasn't the main character. It wasn't, the abuser isn't the leading man, right? Like these women on screen, listening to them tell their stories directly, I felt was much more powerful and empowering and kind of reclaiming of their story. And um, I wanted to do them justice and also focus mostly on how these incredible women are not only helping themselves but helping others, and I think that is a true testament to their amazingness because they're paying it forward in ways that you couldn't even imagine, right? And you think that this is something that you personally are going through and that's it, you're just focused on yourself, but these women all have reached out a hand and pulled the next person along with them, which I think is amazing.
They did, and that was the encouraging part about paying it forward. Each one, even though they have their own personal story, it's like the old saying, your test becomes your testimony. And it's exactly this with all three of these women. What they endured, yes, it was bad, but it's not been wasted. They used
Mm.
it to their advantage and now using it to help others find that same freedom and, more importantly, to find that healing over that situation and gain their true identity. And I think Maha Bodhi's story, wow. I mean,
Yeah.
you kicked off your documentary with Maha, but as I was watching her and listening to her story, something popped up into my mind that I don't know if a lot of people even think about.
Hmm.
With Maha's story, there is a new level of domestic violence in our country with the influx of new cultures to our society. I mean, she escaped Yemen to find freedom and liberation in America, but the type of domestic violence she experienced is now under the shadow of the American dream. How can we help these women?
Yeah. I mean, that Maha's story, unfortunately, is one of many, and I think the serendipity of her finding and stumbling upon Judge, that doesn't happen every day. And even Judge mentions, in his speaking points that for every Maha, there's 20 that we couldn't get to, or women that couldn't escape or couldn't get out. And I think that it's really important to understand that people seeking asylum, you have to understand, at least from maybe watching Maha's story, to give you a little insight that everyone, if you're if people are pushing away asylum seekers, you have to really ask yourself, what are they escaping, what are they running from? Because I think if you ask yourself that, and look to Maha's story as just one example, it's terrifying, and we should be as open as possible to help people who are seeking asylum or who are trying to come to our country, because what they're escaping is terror on a whole nother level that, isn't as common in the United States.
And I was shocked because within her story, you bring up a judge who wrote this act. This act was implemented, which this is what really shocked me, in 1980, 44 years ago.
Hmm.
And how many women even know that this act exists?
Right. Right. That was so long ago, and even in the process of making this film, right, that became so such an astounding fact for us as well, right? Like Maha kind of fell into that situation where someone was able to utilize legislation to help her seek asylum, but most people don't even know that that's an option. Um, and if you don't even know that's an option, there's a missed opportunity there for us as well, to be helping more people.
Yeah, and that alone is just that federal act. That alone is a huge story. And here we are, we have these laws available to help people, but
Mm,
nobody knows that they actually exist. So I was I was extremely happy that you bring this forward and able to interview the gentleman who actually wrote it, and he even knew that Maha's story needed to be told because he was
yeah.
like, this act was written for someone, for like just for her.
Mhm. Yeah,
And it was inspiring.
he's amazing, and the work that he's done, not only under, that statute, but in all the other legislation that he's helped with. He really is just a champion for, these women and for people going through similar situations. And the fact that he said, "I wrote the law for people like you," like, I get goosebumps every time I say that or hear that in the film, because that's so beautiful, and I think it does need to be it does need to be more well known. Like, we need people to understand that, and I really hope that this film can be, a catalyst for having those conversations, and for even at the base level of being aware of everything that we talk about in the film. If we can do that on a large scale, I think we will all benefit.
You know, I because of your film, I pray that the right person, the right business person, maybe a venture capitalist type person that will see this film and literally start an advertising campaign. Because if women know that this act is actually on the books, it's still active. You can, you can use it to help yourself or to help others. It's almost like we need a major national advertising campaign to remind people that this act exists, and that if
Hmm.
you are a victim of domestic violence and abuse, there is help, and there is help on the federal level, because you can't deny that. So if anybody watching or listening, and look, if you're a billionaire, hey, you need to step up to the plate, because there are millions of women that need help, but they need to know that there are things like this available to them and help them. Meredith, there was another thing in your documentary that I've heard things about this, but I didn't realize how bad it was. How did the COVID pandemic make domestic violence against women worse?
Yes. So at the beginning of our film, we mentioned the shadow pandemic that was happening during COVID-19, which refers to the uptick of domestic violence situations. Previously to COVID-19, the statistic was 1 in 4 women were affected. And post COVID-19, that statistic went up to 1 in 3. And we really leaned in, I thought, almost perfectly as a visual representation to have 3 stories to focus on, to amplify that statistic and to kind of bring that point home that this isn't going away. And if anything else, COVID-19 clearly exacerbated a lot of underlying issues, underlying traumas that were happening, especially because during lockdown, people weren't able to go anywhere, right? We were all confined to our home. But if your home is where the abuse and the trauma is happening, you have nowhere to go. And I think that that's a huge point to also push across, and why this film is so timely as well, because it's about time that we bring this to the forefront, and that everyone, like you're saying, billionaires, people watching, like we all need to be talking about this, because it is a pandemic that is happening and that is affecting 1 in 3, and that's an insane number. And the fact that it's 1 in 3 women, it means, you throw a rock and you hit someone who's probably been affected. If not personally, they know someone, or, they watched it happen, or they experienced it. So I definitely think it needs to be known.
Well, you have cast the first stone, so I thank you for that, because again, this film is very, very powerful. But your film brings up so many elements, not questions, but just these insights that I think will help a lot of people, especially women. So, with your documentary Scars Unseen, you provide very valuable insights about the root cause of domestic violence, which was which was really highlighted in this film. Every abuser themselves were abused in some way prior to becoming an abuser. Did that insight surprise you?
I think it makes sense, honestly, when you think about it, because hurt people hurt people. And so when you really pulled back the layer as to why is that person abusive in the first place, it does make a lot of sense. But it's a sad fact that those people are not only inflicting pain, but also were in pain themselves.
Okay, let me ask you a question. And I've seen research, I've seen medical researchers, psychologists talk about this. And this is for women. Women who end up getting married seem to gravitate to a man that resembles their father, or the way that their father treated them as they were growing up. Did you see that while you were creating this film?
I I didn't we definitely talked about it, and I think what it ultimately comes down to is that we naturally gravitate towards people that we feel comfortable with, that have that kind of homey, safe feeling, and if that is what you're used to, that's kind of your comfort zone. So it's more natural, I would say, for a lot of people to gravitate towards those types of people and relationships, especially because that's what you're used to. That's how you grew up, or that's how things were. It's not always the case. There's definitely like a lot of research, and people, it's always the Freudian thing about, or the Oedipal complex about, going along with someone that's like your mom or your dad. But I really think it just comes down to that comfort and what you kind of associate safety and home to be.
Yeah, everybody hopes to meet Prince Charming, and hopefully that they don't end up being the Incredible Hulk.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
that's an interesting way of, I've never heard that saying.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a
that's
good
a
way
little
of saying it.
drastic, but with a lot of the stories that millions of women
Mhm.
can tell, it
Yeah.
sounds like that. But for
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
as I was watching this documentary, because I love the way that you shot it because you even put a camera behind all the camera and the setup for the interview. So you kind of give us that behind the scenes look as you are there interviewing each woman. How
Mhm.
emotional was it for you to sit and listen to these stories of these women and the abuse they endured?
Yeah, it's definitely, I feel that I carry it with me. I felt that um I needed to establish a safe space for these women to talk to me and build that foundation of trust and relationship in order for them to feel comfortable resharing and rehashing, some of the most terrible days of their life. And I wanted to make that process as seamless as possible because I knew it was going to be hard regardless, right, of what I did and how re-triggering that could be for people. So I also, it was very emotional for me, and I did want to showcase the behind the scenes element because I feel a lot of times we don't see who's asking the questions, and we don't see, in documentaries, like any of the behind the scenes or the process or like the human to human connection. And I think that's missing in a lot of our films and content because it really matters who's asking the questions, and it matters in people's responses. And you can tell on camera in an interview when someone is having an adverse reaction to the person asking the questions. And I think that's an important thing to share and to kind of showcase as well. And especially given this subject matter, I wanted to showcase that we can all meet each other where we're at, and we just have to have like a human approach, right? Like these are people, this is their life, this is their story. Um, and so it has been emotionally challenging for me as well to separate, especially during the post-production process. That was a quite a long process, but a good process. But it was very challenging because I felt so strongly about making sure that these women's stories weren't being cut short, or weren't, I wasn't taking out the bits that like really were essential to them, or that they felt. So I had a hard time, especially in the post production process, and trying to narrow things down and shorten it. But I'm very happy with how it came out, and what I was able to do with my editor, Sarah, who just was the best to work with.
Well, there must have been some film days where you probably went home and you were just emotionally drained.
Yes, there definitely were a lot of days that I needed to recover, and I think that's another element too of the whole, conscientious documentary, but also filmmaking approach, right? Like we have to remember that we have to take care of ourselves as interviewers, as documentary filmmakers, but we also have to take care of the people that are in front of the camera, and how they might need breaks, or how they might, need time to recover, or maybe they need therapy, or resources after the film has come out. So really just trying to be conscientious about that, and respect ourselves and each other.
Well, what has been the response from women who have seen your film?
Yeah, so when we premiered at Dances with Films, that was the first time that, and it was at the Chinese theaters, which was so cool. And I'm from LA, so it was all my friends and family coming too to support, and that was awesome. And the feedback was incredible because um, I was nervous. I was nervous, but because you never know. You never know, right? How, and it is a hard subject and it is heavy, but so many people came up to me afterwards saying like, Wow, I feel so empowered. I feel so inspired by these women. I loved the way that you told the story, but that you had a hopeful angle and that it wasn't all doom and gloom, and that it provided like actionable resources or ways for you to kind of imagine for yourself what healing or recovery might look like. And ultimately, a lot of people were just really amazed by these women's stories and how incredible they were, but also felt that uplifting emotion of, wow, that was absolutely terrible what happened to them, but look at what they have done. And so that's been amazing. I'm like, people get it. You
Well,
know,
what I
that's
liked, yeah, because what I liked about it, Meredith, was after each woman's story was told, I remember the positives that they're
mm,
doing now far more than remembering what they endured. Now, yeah, Maha story. Yeah, I can, I understood that. I understood Adrienne's. I understood Trish's story. But yeah, there you make the positive. You make that transition into the positive so seamless that that's going to be the thing that everybody is going to see and notice and remember, which is a great thing with a film like this. But I
mm.
also have to ask, what has been the response from men who have seen your film?
Honestly, the response was the same. So far, a lot of men, and even in the process of like going through the festival, I had a couple other filmmakers come up to me and say, I never told anyone, but I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, or I had people come forward and share that even personal tidbits with me before they'd even seen the film. They were just excited to hear, that people were talking about it. And I thought that was beautiful. I had one gentleman come up to me and he actually come with his high school daughters, and he was so thankful that they were able to see this at their age, and also to be aware and to be empowered as well, to know that these things exist and to maybe start those conversations a lot younger than I traditionally was taught or learned about. And I thought that was really, really, he not only film, but he was so excited that his daughters had this to watch and to see and could share and talk about it, and kind of start that conversation with them.
Boy, that opens up a whole new territory because kudos to the father for bringing his daughters and saying, this is not how men are supposed to act. And in a
Mm-hmm.
way, getting them ready when they do leave the house. Maybe they go to college and find and you end up with a boyfriend or whatever. Kudos to that father. And you know what? This could be a great film to be shown in colleges.
Yes. Love to. We're working on a community screening tour right now, but especially for universities, because into the curriculums of the different, silos, like how we kind of approach psychology, talk about the legal aspect a little bit. We talk about, the informed element, the social justice undercurrent. Like, we can take this film and use it and look through all those various lenses and build that into curriculum to start, approaching this large, large issue that seems so overwhelming, but through these very specific ways of learning and, methodologies, and analyze it and use it as a tool to analyze other media, analyze other, laws of existence, analyze anything it kind of relates to. So yes, I would love that, and I'm working on it. So if you know people, send them my way.
Hey, I will absolutely do that. But Meredith, I truly believe that your film gives women the courage to leave an abusive relationship, knowing there is help available to them right now. And I've got to hand it to Trish. She says, look, there's always a way out. And I
Mm,
love that because that one statement was so powerful. It will give millions of women hope. Yes, regardless what you think your situation is, there is a way out.
yes, I love that line. That was one of my favorites through that whole film, and to just provide that kind of beacon of hope a true testament, to that. And I think she continues to do that in her work and in everyone that she encounters through her nonprofit. So I'm so grateful that they get to continue, we so need.
Oh, much so. So for you, what is next on your filmmaking horizon?
Yeah, so next up, I am working on developing another feature documentary, and that's La Revolution, which is about starting a sexual health revolution in women's healthcare specifically. So, looking at the disparities in women's healthcare and like the systems of oppression, how gynecology started, where we are today in terms of the subpar care, and then also looking at the femtech and other industries that are kind of trying to bridge the gap between the healthcare system and everyday people to provide and hopefully challenge us to, illuminate a better.
Well, you're definitely going to have to come back when that film is done. I've covered that subject a little bit with some other experts in that field, and the medical community needs to treat women better. They need to treat women with more respect and stop saying, oh, it's all in your head, because it's not. So
Yeah.
I can't wait. Get that film going, because when you get it done, I want to see it, and you got to come back and we're going to cover that subject too.
Oh, yes, that one we could talk about for days because it's mind-boggling, honestly, the things that I'm learning throughout this process as well. Just to add on to your point of like how medical gaslighting has become such the like that's the norm, and that's like what people are experiencing, expecting and tolerating. And the fact that only 50% of medical schools require, studying of the sexual health, that alone should explain, but also
Okay.
make us mad.
I'll give you a little shocking tidbit on that. I found out
Okay.
that in medical research, that especially if researchers are studying female athletes, the
Mm,
model that they use is a 140-pound man, not a female. So when a let's say a track coach is
mhm.
working out the workout and the nutrition for that female athlete, the research is based on a man, not based on a woman, because they never count or include the hormonal changes and other factors. So you've got a lot of homework to do.
Work to do, but I'm excited to tackle it because it needs to be known. And just like you're saying, we don't even have the awareness of how bad it really is, or how everything is based off of the male body, and they're completely different anatomies. So that makes no sense to me. So this doc is really just kind of like a one also applies to health as a whole, right? Because women have different symptoms of heart attacks than men do. Women have, different symptoms for a lot of diseases, and that accounts for a lot of misdiagnosis and sometimes deaths. And I think anyone should care about that. Everyone should
Uh,
care about that.
Absolutely. So I cannot wait for that documentary. But ladies and gentlemen, the three main characters in Scars Unseen are Maha, Bodhi, Trish, Steele, and Adrienne, RoWon. And the excellent narration is provided by research expert Rachel Louise Schneider. Now, Scars Unseen is an inspiring documentary, highlights each individual's experience involving domestic violence, focusing again not on the grim details of their trauma, but rather on the tools and techniques that help them to persevere on their healing journey. Again, Scars Unseen shines a light on the power of healing, de-stigmatizes victimhood, and encourages open communication about the causes, treatment, and prevention of abuse. This documentary focuses on the resiliency of three phenomenal women and encourages all of us to be, well, more trauma informed. Scars Unseen is changing the conversation around domestic violence. Now, if you are a victim of domestic violence right now, call the number on your screen, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. And as Trish Steele stated in the film, there is always a way out. Well, I want to thank you, Meredith, for sharing this important subject and your powerful film with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the outlet and for sharing this with your audience, and I hope it changes lives.
Oh, you can bet on that and be assured that you're going to be changing and helping millions of women's lives just by bringing this film forward. So I thank you, Meredith. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a victim of domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline again is 1-800-799-7233. And as for me, I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time.